Are you looking to expand your aesthetic practice and attract high-quality new patients? Discover the power of digital marketing in growing your practice with a personalized strategy session. Join Ryan Davies, Equa's Marketing Director, for an exclusive 90-minute meeting. Ryan and his team will invest hours prior to your session, crafting a customized marketing plan tailored specifically for your practice. This invaluable opportunity comes at no cost to you, with no commitments attached. Schedule your meeting with Ryan today and take the first step towards transforming your practice with the potential of digital marketing.
Get ready for an extraordinary opportunity. You're invited to join our exclusive monthly webinar, brought to you by the Aesthetic Institute and the Business of Aesthetics community. Don't let this chance slip through your fingers. Secure your spot now for a game-changing experience. Explore the details on our homepage at www.businessaesthetics.org and get set to transform your strategies.
You are listening to another episode of the Business of Aesthetic podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsors MRP and Equa Marketing. We also want to thank our silver sponsors ProNox and Lenger Law. If you would like to network and share your experience with our podcast guests and other aesthetic industry professionals, join our Facebook or LinkedIn communities by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Prepare to be inspired as we introduce an esteemed professional in the field of plastic surgery. Meet Dr. Lauren Umstadt, a board-certified plastic surgeon of exceptional repute, practicing in the vibrant locale of Leawood, Kansas. Her expertise and dedication have earned her high acclaim in the industry. And today, we have the privilege of delving into her insights and experiences right here on the podcast. Without further ado, let's dive in.
Good morning. We have Dr. Lindsey Pennington. She is a facial plastic surgeon in Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm so excited to talk to Lindsey today. I have been fangirling her for years. And Lindsey, I don't know, you probably don't remember this, but when I was interviewing for residency, I actually met you at the dinner. I think you were a chief resident at the time.
I totally remember that. That's crazy.
And I thought, wow, she has it all together. Like, she's beautiful. She's matched into facial plastics. She, I don't know, you just had this aura about you of just like this calm, confident resident at the time. You went on to do a fellowship. Years later, I actually ran into you at a meeting. I caught you in an elevator. I was like dreaming of opening my own practice at the time. So, for the audience that doesn't know you, you opened your practice in 2017, right out of fellowship. Is that right?
That's correct. So directly out of fellowship, I started my own solo private practice. I was 5 months pregnant at the time, and it was definitely an adventure for myself and my family, but it's one that I would never take back. It's the best decision I've ever made for myself and my family and my life. So it is something that I wasn't, it wasn't like I always knew I wanted to do this. It was something that kind of during residency, my kind of interest in facial plastics developed. I originally kind of went in thinking maybe I was interested in peds. I really liked the cleft lip, cleft palate portion of that. I really liked airways. And as my training progressed, I kind of realized that I wasn't made for academics, that being my own boss was something that was going to be really important to me. And so and then when I realized the parts of peds that I liked as well had to do, and there was a crossover with facial plastics, I started exploring that avenue. And the more I found out about plastics, the more exposure I got, the more interested I got. It's a really good mix of kind of art and science, which is how my brain works. I don't have that like completely linear thought process. I kind of get big ideas and then go from there. And so that's kind of the artistic part of my brain. And you get to do that with facial plastics. And so once I kind of realized that that's the direction that my kind of brain and passion was going, then I started interviewing for jobs and looking around, and I got offered a couple of really nice jobs in big fancy cities. And I realized during that process of, okay, I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to put all of my passion into something, but I'm going to have no control over the experience. And my artistic and OCD brain that mixed well together was like, well, I care what the chairs are like that my patients are going to sit in. I care what the person who's answering the phone says and sounds like. And in the situations where I would have been joining another practice, I wasn't going to get to have that kind of creative control of the entire experience. And that's when I started kind of exploring what it would look like to do it on my own. So, and then I went from there.
A lot of similarities, I think, between us. Because yeah, I love having complete autonomy over the patient experience, like you mentioned. What were some of the harder things in terms of starting your own business? Because we don't get a ton of business training in our background. And I know that you're married to a physician who may or may not have some business experience. What were some of the little things that you learned along the way that might be helpful for those residents today who are thinking about starting their own practice?
So what actually changed my life, and this is going to sound really silly, is when I was doing all these interviews, my husband started kind of laying the seed work for me of like, I think he was almost like, I think you're going to be a terrible employee. You should think about other options. But he actually bought me a business plan for dummies for Christmas. So December of my fellowship year. Because I had never even heard of what a business plan was. My husband has an engineering background, so we are both just like huge science nerds and knew nothing of business. And so it's a very kind of simplified version of a business book that kind of explains what a business plan is and the utility behind it. So kind of getting through that, and it even has like a little workbook component through it. So it kind of walks you through a big picture outline of what a business plan is, then you can kind of diffuse through that and kind of really make an actual business plan. So I spent the next couple of months just making a business plan. And so once I had a business plan on paper, and that's something that when I meet residents or fellows or other people who are actually out in practice and they want to start their own thing, I always say start with a business plan. And I even recommend that specific book, A Business Plan for Dummies, because a lot of the other business plan books are geared towards people with a business background, and it can make it seem very overwhelming. And this is a way to kind of simplify it. And so when I finished my business plan, my husband and I went to the bank and they're like, okay, we've seen a lot of doctors before. And they took me into a little side room and sat me down. And I think some of it was, I'm a petite blonde, I'm female. And I went in and was like, oh, I've got this idea. And they sat me down and they were like, okay, sweetie, like, what's the name of your business? And I was like, oh, I don't actually have a name. Here's my 28-page business plan with my pro forma. And then at that point, they brought other people in, started taking me seriously, got my line of credit, and kind of started moving forward from there. But it also not only helped me be taken seriously in kind of that setting of when I'm asking for large amounts of money and asking for unsecured lines of credit and things like that when you already have a bunch of student loans. But every decision that I made after that, when I was deciding if I should buy, a centrifuge and invest in PRP, which was a $7,000 purchase. And at the time of a brand new business, that's a really big expense. That's going to be the difference of whether or not I take a paycheck that month or not. I did everything with, is this on brand? Does this fit with my business? And I could just refer back to my business plan every single time I was trying to make a decision for my practice to kind of take the emotion and the fear out of it and just say, does this fit my goals? Does this fit the pro forma? And that kind of helped keep me on track during those early stages when everything is just crazy.
That's such good advice. Do you ever look back at that pro forma that you wrote years ago and laugh or think about how on track you were? I mean, looking back at it now, what are your thoughts?
It's so crazy looking back at it now. So I actually pulled out my business plan about 2 months ago to read the mission statement of my business plan to my employees, because I was having a little kind of identity crisis in my practice. I have brought on another physician who was working there, and everybody just kind of seemed uninspired. And so I kind of went back to my roots and what inspired me and pulled out my business plan and was reading them my mission statement and kind of telling them what my goals were then so that they could understand why I'm asking everything that I'm asking of them, why I say, we don't have our patients do any paperwork, why we are always the rainbows and sunshine, why we always greet everybody by name, why we spend the extra 5 minutes and make notes about the patient's interest in their chart and not just their medical history. And so it was something that, looking at that then, was so gratifying, because my mission hasn't changed over the last 7 years. And that part was really fun. In my pro forma, and when I was picking my office space, I told my husband, "Oh, I've done something terribly wrong if I need more space." And I've, I've taken on another position. I have 10 employees. I've already built out a completely separate aesthetic space that is 2,000 square feet. I'm building out a surgical suite that's another 5,000 square feet. And so it's something where, at the time of my pro forma, I just could have never imagined where I am now, which is incredible. And so right now, when people ask me, would you ever, I'm like, well, when I said I would never, I always have. So I'm not going to say no. I'm just going to say not right now. It's just fun to watch how that's progressed.
And I saw recently that your husband is going to be joining your team. Is that right?
Yeah. So he, I don't know if the word's retired, but we're using the word retired. He retired from his full-time anesthesia practice in January. And he has joined my practice as kind of my COO, because I don't have an office manager. I don't have a practice manager. I've been doing all of that myself this entire time. And some of that is because I just have trouble giving up control. And so he is somebody that I fully and unequivocally trust. So he's in a position where I think he can kind of pick up some of the slack in that area where I just need support, because I'm spread too thin. And then once my surgical suite is open, he'll be able to provide anesthesia on the days that I'm operating.
That's so cool. Let's back up a little bit on that point. You said that you were kind of in crisis mode, or trying to remotivate your employees. And you talked a little bit about your original vision. Do you find that keeping employees motivated is a challenge? What things have worked in the past? Maybe what are some things that you tried that didn't work? I know that, I'm very green, but I've already had a few little staff hiccups. And I think it's just so common in really any business.
I've learned a lot. This is like kind of the HR process of things has been the hardest part about running a business. I thought that being a surgeon was going to be the hard part. It's not. Like, operating is amazing. It's the best part of my week. And it's really kind of the interpersonal relationships that go with having employees that has been the most challenging part about running a business. And not everybody's love language, for kind of lack of a better word, is the same. So I've done things where I've given raises across the board. I've done things where I've given free services to people. And I do those things and I just unequivocally think it's going to make everybody happy, and it doesn't. So you have to figure out what works for each employee, because each employee is different. And so I've started doing these little kind of questionnaires, and I call them the employee appreciation questionnaire, where I have them write down like what their favorite restaurant is, what their favorite skincare product is, what the favorite services we have at the office. And then I literally say, like, how would you like to hear that you're appreciated? And some people literally say, I just need you to tell me that you appreciate me. I need you to say thank you. I need you to tell me how good I'm doing. And other people are like, I want cookies. And other people are like, I want cash. And so having them kind of fill that out helps some. It's still one of those things that I think some people who are not in the aesthetics business and then they join it, there's a kind of social media cushion around aesthetics. And I think they think when they join a plastic surgery practice that we sit around and do facials and Botox and giggle on Instagram all day. And it is really hard work, and the hours are long, and our patients are very kind of demanding. It's a very competitive business, and they have lots of choices of where they go. And you really need to deliver like amazing results with a high level of service to get repeat customers. And so your standards need to be high. And if you don't have employees that are able to do that, it's going to be hard for them to keep up. And then employees can it's just the amount of kind of being self-aware is challenging too, because they can misunderstand where their strengths are when applying for a job with you. And then once they're with you, you can see where their strengths are. And I think sometimes it's not always where you have them. And so getting them, and my husband and I call it getting them on the right seat in the bus, is really kind of important. And so I do this thing where after their first 3 months with me, we do what's called a 5-year plan, where we sit down and we say, okay, this is where you are now. Where do you want to see yourself in 5 years? And even if it's not within the company, even if their goal is to become a nurse or do something like that, how do they get there and what are the steps? Or if somebody's goal is to make 6 figures or somebody's goal is to get this amount of education, we kind of map out a way where there's objective milestones that they can meet or not meet, and we can base bonuses off of that, educational opportunities off of that, et cetera. And that, for them to have something to look forward to and an objective way for them to measure themselves, an objective way for us to measure them, I have found to actually be the most helpful. It's really time consuming, but it's the way to find employees that are hungry and keep them motivated for the most part.
What do you feel like some of your strengths are as a boss?
This is going to sound like one of those generic like interview questions, but it's a strength and a weakness. I'm extremely direct and I know what I want. And so I think it can be challenging to work for somebody if they don't know what they want, because then you're kind of not guided. And so I'm very good at communicating what I want. And I'm very kind of good at knowing what I want and moving in that direction. And I think as a leader, that's important. I live in the South and I am female, and the way that communication is done here, and I'm not originally from the South. And I think that's part of where the challenge comes in, is I don't communicate or talk like I'm from the South. And it can be a little bit off-putting to people who are not used to direct communication, and they can interpret it as rude. And even in residency, I had a lot of challenge where my tone was perceived as being rude or demeaning when it really was not meant that way at all. I really thought that I was communicating in the best interest of kind of what the next steps were. And so part of that is being self-aware. I've tried to improve on that. And the other thing that I'm doing is I'm pulling my husband in and I'm just telling him what I want and having him be the person that communicates it, and it's being perceived a lot better. So
how much of that do you think is being a woman, especially when you talked about residency? Because I personally felt like once I was a senior resident, getting more of that forest view of our team, I felt like the female residents were judged more critically, both by our staff, like our attendings, but also some of the ancillary staff at the hospital, particularly nurses. If you're a tall 6-foot man that walks into the operating room during an urgent case and starts barking orders, they take you seriously. But when you're a 5'3" female that walks in and starts barking orders, I think there's a different perception.
I definitely think there's a different perception. I think in general, being a female surgeon is challenging. I think particularly in the South, it can be a challenge. It's definitely something that I had to contend with in multiple circumstances. And I think, I don't know, I think it's part of the business, and it's really, I don't see it changing anytime soon. I think it's like this kind of deep-seated kind of cultural norm. And I think as the amount of women in the specialty changes, and it's changing dramatically, that perception has no choice but to change, because they're going to walk into a room and it's going to be all women. Like there's going to be nobody in the room. The anesthesiologist is a woman. All the nurses are women. The doctor is a woman. And it's going to be women communicating with women. And that's, I already see it happening now. And it's how women perceive other women is also an issue too. It's not just,
Sure.
Yeah, it's not just a man issue. And so I think it's something that as the numbers change, it's going to be just kind of learning to accept it, and us learning to communicate well with each other. And learning that being direct doesn't necessarily make you a rude person or a bad person. It just means that you have no time to waste because there's a really urgent thing happening. And so I think it's a very real thing that I've dealt with. I think it's getting better. And I think it's just one of those things.
I want to know how you do it all. Okay, so you've got your practice that you're running. You know, you're a leader. You're also a surgeon and a doctor. You have a partner. You have 2 children, and you are very involved with continuing education, you know, going to meetings. And then I know you have a restaurant, some other entrepreneurial endeavors. Like, do you just not sleep?
I don't sleep a lot. The restaurant is something that has been honestly, to date, the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. Prior to that, it was breastfeeding my children over a year while being a full-time surgeon, and like them never getting formula. I thought that was like my biggest life accomplishment then. No, it's actually running a restaurant. That is not for the faint of heart. It is really, really challenging. It's a lot of work. It is an HR nightmare. But it was a thing that was important to my husband. And as you mentioned, I am a partner, and he has spent a lot of time working really hard to support our family while I was starting my practice and doing a job that he didn't love the way that I loved my job. And so this was something that was really important to him. And so it's my turn to be supportive now and kind of pay back what he's given me. And so the thing that I say a lot, I get asked this question a lot because the optics are, how do you do it all? And I don't do it all well all the time. So there are days where I am a really kick-ass mom, and I will like cancel an afternoon clinic and I go have lunch with my kids and I do something fun or we do an activity. But that day I'm not being a good doctor because I'm not there for my patients. My staff are having to work extra hard without somebody on site. Like, it does affect one area every time I pull in and focus on something. And then there are days where I'm not a kick-ass mom and I'm having to leave early, and this is part of why I'm building out my own OR. But on OR days right now, I leave before they wake up in the morning. And then if I have a long day, like, I'm getting home either right when they're going to bed or after they've gone to bed. And that's a whole day that I'm not seeing my kids. And so, or like I'll go to a conference and I'm out of town and my husband is single parenting and I come home and I'm exhausted and he wants to see me and he wants to hang out. And all I want to do is sleep for 24 hours because I've been extroverted and kind and put makeup on every day and put on cute outfits and talk to people and done lectures. And then I come home and I want to be an introverted cocoon and hide and sleep. So I think it's about balance, and that I'm never doing everything great at once, and that you just have to pick your battles and put them where it's most needed at that time. And it's just a kind of a constant triage list of what needs to be dealt with most urgently.
What's your average week look like right now clinically? How much are you in clinic? How much are you operating? How much time is spent doing administrative things with the practice?
So, it is not as balanced as I would like it to be. And this is part of why my husband has joined the practice, is to kind of help balance this stuff out more. But right now I have admin time on Monday mornings, kind of from 8 to 12. And then usually I do the additional admin time is usually on Saturdays. And I'm usually doing that from anywhere from 8 to 1, 8 to 2 on Saturdays. I usually do like an injection clinic and see post-ops on Monday afternoons. I'm usually operating Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then I have an injection clinic on Fridays. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, when I'm like done in the OR, I'll be seeing post-ops. And then with Thursdays, it's every other Thursday I'm in the OR. The Thursday that I'm not in the OR is when I'll be doing my surgical consults. So, and then what I'm trying to get rid of, I'm trying to get 2 full days of not doctor work in. So I think I'm going to give up my Monday injection clinic day and take a full day as an admin day on Saturday, because I can't get admin stuff done while my staff are in the office, because everybody comes and talks to me and interrupts and does that stuff. So I think I'm going to take my admin on Saturdays and take it where I have Sunday, Monday as my like non-clinical duty days. And that'll give me time to kind of actually just maybe be in my house without husband and kids, and I can clean and exercise and eat, or just maybe sleep a little. Those kind of things.
Just the little things.
Yeah, shower by
Yeah.
myself. Like, you know.
Talk about your partner, and she's a dermatologist. Talk
Mhm.
about how you decided to bring her on, how she complements things. It's such a smart pairing, you know, you as a surgeon and her as a dermatologist. I also love the fact that she's a fellow physician and she just had a baby, so she's a mom, right?
Yeah, she's a mom of two. So she had her second child, which was a daughter. I guess Gigi's probably about 8 months old now. So she, it was a good fit, and it was an accidental thing that had happened. So I had previously, when I was pregnant with my son, was feeling kind of like very overwhelmed, very, very tired, and was like, I need help. And so I had reached out to a PA that I knew who had kind of expressed interest. And I was like, you know, I'm not really sure that bringing somebody else on is what I want. But at the point, I was just exhausted and needed help. So I reached out to her. I hired her, and it turned out to not be a good fit, and for lots of reasons. And that there was a lot of growth and education that come from that not working out. And I think I actually learned more from my mistakes and downfalls than I do from wins.
Break that down for us. How did you realize it wasn't a good fit? Because sometimes it's hard when you're in the moment.
Oh, I definitely kept her longer than I should have. Like, my patient care coordinator was like, yeah, after the first 2 weeks, I knew it wasn't going to work. And I think I was so tired and so desperate for help that I was like fighting to make it work. And I honestly, I think it just comes down to like general work ethic, like needs to match. And so your goals for yourselves and the business need to be on the same page. And in general, non-surgeons have a very kind of like linear, like 8 to 5 view of their job, where us in our surgical training, it wasn't like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, like we're done with our shift, we go home. Like, we work until the work is done, and then we go home. And it's just, the training is just different. There's no judgment with that. It's just empirically, it's a different thing that we were trained on. And so I was like, okay, this isn't working. There isn't like an 8 to 5 shift. You don't leave like in the middle of a patient. You don't finish before your notes are done. Like, it's not a thing. And also just like the general speed at which the person worked was really, really slow. And I have a highly efficient practice because, again, I am a mom. I do want to spend time with my kids. And so when I'm at work, I work really hard so that when I'm home, I can be home. And so it just wasn't a good fit. The patients weren't receptive. It just in general, the personality wasn't a fit for my brand. And I think potentially I could have maybe found a PA or NP or somebody that was a fit if our personalities had been a better fit. But the way that my brand is in general is I do kind of charge more. I do provide a higher level of care and service. And so when Dr. Soil reached out to me, she literally slid into my DMs and was like, hey, I'm a dermatologist. I don't know if you've ever been looking. The good part about the PA that had worked with me is that she came from a derm background. And so I got to see the value that they have and that their education has and how it mixed in with the facial plastic surgery, because she was constantly bringing up derm things and kind of improving the overall patient care by adding that value. So I was like, you know what, I really am open to this. And so I met with her. We had her and her husband come over for dinner. Her husband is also a physician. So it was another like dual physician home. And he is from rural Louisiana. My husband's from rural Louisiana. It was just something where we had a lot in common. And she seemed hungry. Like, she seemed like she wanted to like hustle, which was nice. I liked that. And so it was something where I didn't need it, and I didn't feel like I was coming into it from a place of vulnerability. It was more of like a place of excitement. And it wasn't like, oh, I'm so exhausted and I need this person. It was like, oh, I might want this person. We seem like we would be a good fit. And so she started working with me as kind of like an employed position. And when she's at work, she hustles. She works really hard. She's really motivated. And the parts of the business that I'm not good at, like I'm not good at Excel spreadsheets and numbers and keeping track of things. I'm like the big picture person who's got the big ideas and can make stuff happen, but I don't track the nitpicky parts. And she's really good at tracking the nitpicky parts. So we fit really well in that aspect. She's also from the Midwest. She also communicates very directly and she takes feedback very well. Like there was no ego involved. If I was like, I don't like how you're doing that, she's like, okay, how do you want me to do it? And I told her and she just did it. And it was very lovely because it didn't hurt her feelings. She wasn't trying to like make space for herself. She didn't have to like prove to me that she was good. She was confident in herself and what she had. And so it worked out really well. And it's progressed to a point where we're into a partnership now and we're both very invested in this business growing and we're able to support each other.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys are the perfect pair. Now, does she take insurance at all?
She doesn't. So she, when she was originally kind of negotiating her contract, she was like, I don't want to lose my medical derm part of her practice. And so what we do is we have a very basic kind of sliding scale of like one medical problem, it's this, two medical problems, it's this, three, it's this, a prescription costs this. And so we have a very kind of transparent pay scale, which for patients without insurance is really nice. People with insurance will pay it because it's not that much different than a couple of copays and deductibles, and we have zero wait time to get in. But I also grew her aesthetics practice so much so quickly because I dramatically cut down on the amount I was injecting that she is happy to have a much smaller medical practice now as well.
Yeah. So what's your 5-year plan? You mentioned that your new employees, when they come on, what do you see for your office, your growth as a surgeon, the things that you offer patients looking ahead?
So this is something that I tell myself, like, okay, this would be my goal. And then I keep hitting my goal and thinking that like, okay, once I get here, I'll relax or I'll chill or I'll be satisfied. And this is probably something that you are going to identify with too, because you seem to be very similar in this, is you kind of reach your goal probably faster than you thought you would. And then you're like, okay, well, what's my next challenge? Like, that's the fun part in this for me is what can I do? Where is my ceiling? Where is my cap? And I don't think I've hit my cap or my ceiling yet. So, surgically, operatively, I've come really far in my kind of surgical skill set. And I would really like to continue to refine that. I think that it's something where you're always going to be learning. You're always going to be growing. One of my passions is a couple times a year, I will go visit a surgeon's practice and just watch them operate and learn and ask questions. And there are so many amazing physicians within our community, within the United States, outside the United States, that are willing to kind of share their techniques and kind of ask mine and go back and forth. And I find that to be the most valuable thing that I do for kind of my surgical skill set. And it's something that I really enjoy and have a lot of passion for. So each year I kind of pick a couple surgeons and reach out to them and make sure that I'm always kind of upping my game and challenging myself operatively and exposing myself to techniques that I may not necessarily think are for me, but see what they have. And you can take bits and pieces. Like, not only do you learn what you want to do, but you also learn like maybe what's not for you as well. And that has value too. So I do want to continue to make sure that I don't get lazy in that, and that I continue to be visiting surgeons and challenging myself operatively and providing the highest level of care. Within the next 6 to 9 months, I should have my own OR. So I've built out we're building out a full OR and then a procedure room. So my goal is to get that accredited and get that up and running and be able to be independent in when and how I book cases. And I'm going to start my cases at 8 so that I can drop my kids off at school, which is really important to me. So that's something that, in the next year I'll have done. And eventually, I'd love to be able to have the opportunity to potentially have a fellowship, have an associate surgeon, so that I can provide an experience that I wish I had had for future surgeons and give them an environment to learn in and get exposed to cosmetics and things like that. So I think eventually that's probably more of like a 10-year plan to get a fellowship. But I think in my future, I think that would be a really nice thing to be able, because I do think teaching is fun, but it is a lot of work and it does slow you down. And so I need to be at a space in my career where I can handle the slow down process. And that is a goal for myself. So probably my 10-year goal would be that. And my 5-year goal would be able to like have another surgeon join the practice and have enough volume that it's something, whether it be a full body or another facial plastics, or I'm kind of gearing myself more towards facelifts, maybe bringing on a rhinoplasty surgeon or something like that. And, but we'll see. It changes, but there's definitely room for growth within myself for sure.
Now, is your surgery center attached to your office?
It is. So I have lots of things that I did wrong. I had originally asked, so my office is in kind of like a shopping center complex. And when I knew I was at a point that I needed to grow and I was already renting additional space for them for kind of where my estheticians and laser techs are, I reached out to them and I was like, hey, can I buy the complex? And they told me, get out of here. And so I bought a lot of land kind of down the street from where my office is, and then paid to demo it, paid for architecture plans, which that alone was $300,000. And then the cost to build out, when they originally kind of quoted me, they were like, it's going to be $300 to $500 a square foot. And then by the time they were done with plans, it was over $600 a square foot to build. And that was just outside of something that I could afford to do. And thank God, right around that time that we got the bid of over $600 a square foot to build, my husband reached back out to the owners of our complex and was like, you sure you guys don't want to sell? And they actually agreed to sell it to us at that time, which was fantastic. Granted, I have a lot now that's completely demoed and ready to build, and plans that I've paid for that I don't get to use. And, you know, that's something where even if I sell a lot, I'm not going to get back everything that I've put into it. But I do now own the building that my office is in. And then there is kind of a secondary building that's with it that I'm going to be building the surgery center in. So it is kind of adjacent to, it's something we're going to have to build a hallway or whatever, but I'm not going to have to move my office, which is fantastic.
That's so cool. Yeah, I have found the same things, that I've learned more from my mistakes and little, I don't even want to call them mistakes, just like little hiccups.
Yes, your journey, from my
Yeah,
journey.
your journey. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Pennington. If there are young surgeons that want to reach out to you or prospective patients that are listening, how best can they find you?
So any way that you guys want to contact me, my personal email is surgeon@penningtonfacialplastics.com. Instagram, I have personal direct control of my Instagram account, Pennington Facial Plastics. And so that's a way you can just direct message me on there. And like I said, I really am so grateful for people who took time out for me when I was starting my business, and I reached out to them and they gave me advice, or surgeons who kind of let me visit their practices, that I almost feel like I'm owed to help the kind of future generations as well. So I'm happy to kind of share my thoughts, share my 2 cents, share my victories and my failures, and provide any advice necessary. But I think, and this is something that for you, Lauren, is probably similar, having a team around yourself that just believes in you too, that's not kind of second guessing you or saying, why are you doing this? But that can just be supportive and cheering for you. And that's, you know, family, spouses, business partners, whoever it is with you, is just people who believe in yourself as much as you do is the most important part. And then also, that imposter syndrome is real. It sneaks in. And so making sure to not really question yourself when you're doing something. Just because something's scary doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that you need to kind of put your big girl panties on and take a deep breath and make it happen anyways.
Do you have days where the quote unquote imposter syndrome is more difficult? And
Absolutely. So I just got back from a meeting in Paris and I gave my first surgical talk at that one. And I'm not really sure what I was thinking where I thought to give my first surgical talk there. I'm used to like our academy meetings that are kind of these like small, intimate, US only facial plastic surgeons. And I think I underestimated the breadth of this completely aesthetic international meeting. I mean, there was over 18,000 people at that meeting. And our like normal academy meetings is like maybe 2,000 people. And so it was something where when I got there and there was a line in the room, and they were literally like the room was maxed out of the people who would get in, and there was people waiting in the hallways. And I got up and people were taking pictures and people were taking videos, and I was about to talk and I was like, why do these people want to hear what I have to say? This is insane. I definitely leading up into that moment and then in the moment itself was like, what have I gotten myself into? Like, why are these people listening to me? I have no value to add to this. And it was a room full of international surgeons. And I gave my talk and I got a bunch of really good questions. And after I finished, I was like, fuck yeah. Like, it was one of those moments where, excuse the profanity, but I didn't feel that I deserved to be up there. And then when I finished and the questions I got and the ease at which I could answer them and the confidence in which of my experience was able to speak about them, I really was a good person to be giving that conversation and giving that talk and providing that information. And I really did give value to the people in that room. But it did take me a minute to believe that and to get there. And so it's something where if I hadn't had a fellow female surgeon who had submitted a talk and was like, I'm doing this, it probably would have taken me another year or two to do it. And so that is something where I think the collaborative support of other females pushing each other and supporting each other is going to help us get past those moments. And I'm forever grateful for her, Tina Ho. She's a facial plastic surgeon in Philly. And she's like, I'm doing this, you should do it. And I was like, oh, should I? And then we did it together. And our kind of support for each other got us both up there, got us both doing it. And we both deserved to be there. We both had a ton of value to add. But I'm not sure if I would have on my own been able to push myself to do that. So I do have to give Tina some props and some support for helping get me up there.
That's so awesome. And probably the first of many,
Hopefully I've already submitted a version of that to our kind of local academy meeting, because now I feel like, and this is something that you probably feel too, like when you go up there and it's Jacono and Nyack and Ben and all these people who are like the guys. And I'm like, I'm not them. I haven't been doing this stuff for 25 years and the OG people of it, but that doesn't mean that I don't have value and I can't speak to my experience. And I wish that when I kind of was a fellow or, a super junior surgeon, that I saw someone up on stage who looked like me and was able to not just get up there and say, this is the awesome surgery I do, these are my amazing results, but like, this is how I progressed from doing a plication facelift to a deep plane facelift. These are the steps that I took. This is how I made it approachable. This is how you can ease into this process instead of like, this is just how you do it, if that makes sense.
1000%. It's less scary when the person is relatable. Yeah, I do think there's a lot of intimidation, not in a bad way, just like you said, like these are the big famous people that produce the most amazing results. And so oftentimes hearing from other people seems more doable.
Yes, exactly. And I think, particularly Dr. Nyack is so approachable and really does spend so much time and energy giving back from an education standpoint, but it's still intimidating. Like not that he even means to be, but it's still scary and it's still intimidating. And his comfort level is so much with everything that it can seem silly for me to be standing on the same stage as him, but at the same time, it's not. And so making sure that I know this, making sure that all of my fellow female surgeons know this, and then making sure that, junior surgeons know this, whether male or female, it doesn't matter. Like, just because you're a little bit newer or a little bit less experienced doesn't mean that you don't have value to add from your experience or how you pick things up or how you learn things and your tips and tricks as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pennington, for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was fun. It's always nice to get to connect with people that really understand the experience that you've been through too.
Are you ready for more? Swing by www.businessofesthetics.org. Resources for a free ebook and a vault of free resources. Elevate your aesthetic savvy. Explore now. Thank you for joining us this week on the Business of Aesthetic podcast series, brought to you by our gold sponsors, MRP and Equa Marketing, and silver sponsors, Lengea Law and ProNox. Would you like to join our growing group of aesthetic industry experts and get featured on the Business of Aesthetics podcast? Or do you know someone who would love to share their strategies for growth in the aesthetic business, providing quality patient care or their clinical expertise? Head over to www.businessofesthetics.org podcast show and apply to be featured as a guest on the show. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen. If you would like to engage with today's speakers or any of our past speakers, join our Facebook group or LinkedIn group by searching for Business of Aesthetics. Thank you and have a great day.